Chapter 1. When missile numbers become the new trigger in the Russia-Ukraine war. The United States and Ukraine once again made the world sit up straight when news leaked Washington is preparing to sell Kiev up to 3,350 missiles with a range of 450 kilometers. If you think this is just a normal military deal, let me tell you, you are wrong. Because in an era where a single artillery shell can create a diplomatic storm, the number of thousands of missiles with a range that can touch the back of the neck of Russia is clearly geopolitical news. Geopolitical context. When Ukraine needs a long breath. Ukraine is currently facing a war that has been going on for more than 3 years. Its arsenal is increasingly depleted, while its rival Russia still maintains its technological strength and huge defense industry output. Ukraine's medium and long-range missiles are either exhausted or not strong enough to put strategic pressure on the Russian rear. This is why this deal is considered an artificial breath, helping Ukraine continue to maintain its resistance and even reverse the situation on the battlefield. To put it simply, with a range of 450 kilometers, a missile from Kiev can reach Belgorod, Kursk, Rostov, and many important military bases deep inside Russian territory. This is no different than a poor but warlike neighbor suddenly being given a giant slingshot that can throw rocks through the barbed wire fence of the big neighbor. Why is the number 3,350 strange? Usually arms deals are announced with nice numbers, 1,000, 2,000, or 5,000. But here, Washington chose 3,350. This is not a random number. According to some defense experts, this number reflects the number that Ukraine needs to maintain tactical bombardment for at least 18 months. If Ukraine uses an average of 5 to 7 missiles per day to attack military and logistical targets, then 3,350 missiles is the energy source for nearly 2 years of organized resistance. In other words, this is not a fun support package, but a long-term strategy. The United States does not want Ukraine to collapse too soon, nor does it want Kiev to win too quickly, but wants to maintain a tug-of-war so that Russia bleeds economically and militarily. The meaning of the 450-kilometer range. If you open the defense map of Eastern Europe, you will see an interesting thing. With a range of 450 kilometers, most of the major cities in western Russia are in the danger zone. For example, from the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv, a missile can reach Belgorod in just a few minutes. From Dnipro, that range is enough to reach the Kursk region. And from Kiev, the missile can threaten the Moscow suburbs if deployed from the north. Of course, 450 kilometers is not enough for Kiev to reach the capital, Moscow, but it is enough to break the safety belt that Russia has always confidently maintained. Jokingly, if Russian soldiers used to sleep peacefully at the Belgorod base, now they might have to sleep with missile alarm headphones. Diplomatic consequences. When allies must also be wary. Every time the United States sells weapons to a country in a war zone, European allies are both happy and worried. Happy because Ukraine has more power to fight Russia, but worried because Russia will not stand idly by. Ukraine's possession of 3,350 long-range missiles could cause Moscow to expand attacks on energy infrastructure, bridges, and even the seaport in Odessa as a deterrent. At that time, NATO countries near Ukraine, such as Poland and Romania, will have to be doubly tense. Many analysts even sarcastically said, if Ukraine has 3,350 missiles, Russia will need at least 6,700 air defense systems to sleep well. This statement not only shows humor, but also reflects reality. Russia will have to spread its defense system over a large territory, and that is an extremely costly problem. Why did the United States choose this time? This is probably a question that makes many people curious, because right when the Russia-Ukraine war is entering a stalemate, the world economy is also greatly affected by inflation, energy prices, and political instability. The U.S. pumping more weapons is not simply to help Ukraine. It is also a reminder to Russia that Washington is never tired, a signal to Europe. If you don't dare to do it, we'll do it. And it's a domestic tactic helping the US government score points with voters when demonstrating its global leadership role. If this war is likened to a chess game, the US is launching a new rook, forcing Russia to recalculate the entire defense chessboard. Conclusion of Chapter 1. Chapter 1 shows that the deal for 3,350 450-kilometer range missiles is not simply an economic contract. It was a strategic turning point, both to give Ukraine more wartime breath and for the United States to maintain a long-term confrontation with Russia. The number, the timing, and the range of the shots all had extremely profound political and military significance.
Chapter 2. The impact of the missile deal on the war situation. If Chapter 1 has helped us visualize the whole picture of this missile deal, Chapter 2 will analyze in more detail. What would happen if Ukraine actually possessed 3,350 missiles with a range of 450 kilometers? This is not simply a story of arms trading, but also a turning point that could change the situation of the war, even change the world's view of the current conflict. 1. Ability to strike deep into Russian rear. With a range of 450 kilometers, Ukraine will be able to reach many strategic targets in Russian territory. Imagine, from Kharkiv, just a few launchers can cover the entire Belgorod-Kursk region and even target important military bases in Voronezh. On the defense map, if you draw a 450-kilometer circle from major Ukrainian cities such as Kyiv or Dnipro, you will see that many Russian energy infrastructures, ammunition depots, and military airports fall into the danger zone. This turns the logistics lines that Russia considers safe into vulnerable targets. 2. Psychological and strategic impacts. Not only is it a physical impact, this deal also has a strong psychological element. Russia is used to attacking from afar, while Ukraine only defends close. If the balance changes, Moscow will have to stretch itself to protect not only the front line, but also the rear. This is like in a football match. The opposing team is used to pressing and attacking, but suddenly the opponent has a few more super strikers to counterattack. The psychological insecurity is real, and it can greatly affect the effectiveness of the Russian army's command. 4. What tricks does Russia have to deal with it? Of course, Russia is no pushover. To deal with long-range missiles, Russia can strengthen its multi-layered air defense system, especially the S-400 and S-500, disperse warehouses and logistics instead of concentrating them at large bases, increase preemptive strikes to destroy the launch pad while it is still in Ukraine. However, it is easier said than done, because once the missile is in the sky, 100% interception is almost impossible, even with the most modern air defense system. 4. Concerns of European countries. Europe, especially countries bordering Russia, will certainly be both happy and worried. Happy because Ukraine is stronger, Russia will be better restrained, but worried because any escalation could push the war beyond Ukraine's borders. At that time, from Poland to Romania, from Germany to France, everyone had to prepare for an unwanted scenario. 5. A little humor to cool off. It can be imagined simply. This deal is like a person being bullied in the schoolyard, suddenly being given a warehouse of extremely modern, long-range slingshots. The bully will no longer dare to act arrogantly, but the supervisor, here international organizations, will have a huge headache because should students be allowed to hold slingshots in the schoolyard? Chapter 3. Geopolitical significance and the future of the war. If Chapter 2 has helped us visualize the whole picture of this missile deal, Chapter 2 will analyze in more detail. What would happen if Ukraine actually possessed 3,350 missiles with a range of 450 kilometers? This is not simply a story of arms trading, but also a turning point that could change the situation of the war, even change the world's view of the current conflict. 1. The message from the United States. This deal, if it realized, is an unofficial statement. The United States will not abandon Ukraine. It shows that Washington is not just providing symbolic aid, but actually wants to give Ukraine teeth to defend itself and counterattack. This message will certainly make Russia recalculate its long-term strategy. 2. The future of peace negotiations. Some experts believe that the more long-range weapons there are, the more difficult it is to negotiate peace. Because when there is an advantage, each side wants to push one step further instead of sitting at the negotiating table. However, on the contrary, it is precisely because Ukraine is stronger that Russia is forced to accept serious negotiations. So this deal can be both a trigger and an opportunity, depending on how it is used. 3. The global security picture. Today's world is like a giant chessboard. Each 450-kilometer missile sold is not only a weapon but also a strategic move. China, North Korea, Iran, all are closely watching. Because if the United States dares to provide this type of weapon to Ukraine, it means that in other hotspots, for example Taiwan or the Middle East, Washington is also ready to take similar strong steps. 4. Future scenarios. There are 3 predicted scenarios. Scenario 1, Ukraine uses these missiles to create pressure, but mainly for defense. Russia is forced to slow down the campaign. Scenario 2, Ukraine uses them to directly attack Russia's key bases. At that time, the risk of Russia escalating, even using more destructive weapons, is very worrying. Scenario 3. These missiles become a carrot to pull Russia to the negotiating table in exchange for stopping the supply or limiting their use. 5. Conclusion and message. Thus, the U.S. is about to sell 3,350 missiles with a range of 450 kilometers to Ukraine is more than just a military transaction. It is a story about the balance of power, about psychological warfare, about diplomacy, and above all, a test of world unity in the face of global challenges. For History and War viewers, the lesson is, in war, no detail is small. A missile, a contract, a 450-kilometer radius circle on the map can change the fate of millions of people. If you find this content useful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can continue to bring you in-depth, easy to understand, and as equally interesting analysis of history and war around the world.